Okay, we're back for our review of the Devourer Below. Hi, Superfeng. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad. I'm ready to talk about the scenario, which I honestly have not played recently. So I'm going to rely on you to kind of walk me through what's supposed to happen.
hmm
And it's just this scenario gets a bad rap. I just read a lot about people saying that it's impossible or it's meant to be, really hard to teach you that it's okay for scenarios to be really hard in Arkham Horror, the card game. But that's not always been my experience with it. I've gotten the resolution at least, and we'll talk about the different ways that you can get a resolution. So let's go ahead and jump over to Tabletop Simulator and walk us through what generally happens in this scenario.
Yeah. So you're going to be starting on the main path, and the whole thing about the main path is that it's connected to all the woods locations. So you're only going to get, I believe, 4 woods locations, but
Mhm.
let's just show them all.
All right, so there's
So
6.
there are 6 total. So the whole point of the woods locations are that it is very weird. These 3 in particular, you investigate with not your book stat.
Hmm.
Um, this one doesn't have clues, and you need clues to be able to advance.
Yeah, we need
So
3 per investigator. Oh, that's you have to go to 3 of these locations then.
yes, and one of them could be not the one you want.
Hmm.
Um, and then this location is the bane of everyone's existence, because you move into it, and then turns out your Agnes will never leave because you have to make that book test. Um, this is probably one of the worst locations in the game, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah,
that's a mistake.
yeah, it definitely is. There's not a lot of scenarios where there is a foolproof if you fail, you cannot move. Most of the time it's either if you fail, do this bad thing or cancel the move.
Hmm.
Thinking about Arcane Barrier and Dunwich.
That's right.
Um, this one is like you are stuck here no matter what. It's tough. This one could have been like, easily taboo to be like, oh, take some horror and then leave. But
Yeah,
anyway,
and then you
um,
you lose your action too, so it's just
yep,
okay.
yeah. It's just tough. I think that this location in general, I think leads to a lot of players' frustration with this particular scenario. Because really only Daisy is going to leave this place.
Yeah, gosh. All right, the other one
Yep.
that seems tough here is okay. I
Yeah.
mean,
Basically, automatic damage in horror. You're not passing that test.
yeah.
Um,
Okay, that's not the world's worst thing in this scenario, but
yeah.
okay. The other ones, like you said, you're testing something different, so that's okay. I can see that that's nice because it's only a 2 shroud location. You might have a good chance of investigating using a different stat than intellect.
Yeah. I think that this caters towards the non-seekers, obviously.
Hmm.
Because Roland can make that fist test easy. Skids can do that one. Agnes is great and great for the willpower test.
Hmm.
Um, it just makes it so that it shares the load with the clues with everyone. Which, to be fair, with this scenario, is not something that you see in other scenarios at all. I would say.
No, I think there's just they reuse these woods locations once in Circle Undone, I believe, right?
Correct.
Hmm. Okay. So you get your 6 clues or 3 per investigator, and then what?
Yeah, and then they come back. So this is one of the coolest things about this. Actually, you know what? Before I get to this part,
Sure.
we should talk about setup.
Yeah.
Because this for me is always the coolest part of the scenario, which is the part up here. If it is past midnight, each player discards 2 random cards from their hand after you've drawn your opening hand. So that is true if you did not get all 6 cultists in the last scenario, or if you did not resign. If the agenda doomed out, then it will be past midnight.
Yeah, we forgot to talk about
I
that for the last one.
Yeah, I think that it's both a strength of that scenario and this scenario because it is teaching the player sometimes it is better to resign than letting the agenda doom out. Generally, the agenda dooming out is worse than you resigning,
Hmm.
and this definitely teaches that because losing those 2 random cards in your hand sucks really bad.
Yeah, and you mulligan for something good, and then you lose them. That's bad.
Yep.
And I think they
Yep.
give you a pretty good amount of warning on that. If you read the agenda of Midnight Mask, it kind of tells you that you really should resign. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's because there is some warning. You're right. I don't know how many people do pick up on that, especially if you're not reading the flavor text, because it is all in flavor text. If you're not reading flavor text, then you're going to miss it. I think for me at least, it's really cool for replayability, in the sense that I think that at least my experience with this is, after I play the scenario and spoiler failed, I was like, I want to do that again and actually do stuff right. Like I want to resign to the last scenario. I want to get as many kills as I can, because that makes this scenario easier.
Yeah, the doom that starts on the agenda also scales with how many cultists you got.
That's true. So there is a balance there, where if you didn't get as many cultists, then you have more time. Actually, no, it's
other way around. Yeah,
other way around, right? So it's the other way. So the better you do, the better you are. So yeah, it's tough. Anyway, moving away from setup. Now we're getting back into the second act, where the cultists that you didn't get spawned in the main path. Which, yes, there are ways around this, aka with dynamite. But this is probably the hardest part of this scenario. It's actually like it's not the final boss fight. It's not getting into the ritual site. It's this part where if you only got, and I'll bring the ritual site out. If you only got 2 cultists and 4 cultists show up here, one of them being the masked hunter, that is almost insurmountable. It's tough. It's real tough. And I can understand people getting frustrated at that. And I won't fault him for that. But personally, when that happened to me, 4 cultists did spawn, and our brains went into overdrive mode on my blind playthrough. We were like, how do we actually do this? And we were actually able to do it, which is really, really cool. For me, at least, it was very satisfying. I don't think it's everyone's thing.
What'd you do? Did you have a cunning distraction or something, or did you just go fight them all?
Yeah, we went in and we were able to fight them all, because first of all, it happens on an act flip, which is very odd, because it's quote unquote something bad that happens on the act flip, which is not something that is normal. And so we were not ready. We had to like kite all the other enemies that we had around to eventually get in there and have someone tank a lot of damage and like use dodge a bunch to not die. And then eventually we were able to cobble enough damage. I think we were able to spend resources with that one woman, that one cultist.
Oh, right. You can still parlay with them, right?
Correct. Yeah. So they still have their abilities to get rid of them on their cards. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but it felt satisfying to think about.
Yeah. So yeah, we didn't talk about tech cards for the last scenario, because I think kind of lots of things can work. And you did mention movement. Here, there's a few things you can do. Like if you do have survival instinct, you can, if you're playing solo, for example, you can just get through the band of cultists, because they don't have hunter, right? They're just going to sit there.
Yes. Except for the mass hunter if he comes back.
Yes. And then you can just leave them there and go to the ritual site, which is totally fine. So survival instinct works, cunning distraction, dynamite blast. I don't think, do any of them have more than 3 health? I think maybe one of them does.
Wolfman Drew.
Yeah. So there's a few things you can do. With more cards, you can just use Drac shoes or something. But it's a defining point here, and I think it's good, because what did you expect that was going to happen? They were not going to show up again. They're the cultists for the ancient one in this campaign, so here they are again.
Yeah.
Okay. So assuming you do get by them.
Yep. So you're into the ritual sites. This just shuffles some cards and put some enemies there. Effectively, you just have to make these tests. It's a action to spend clues, and you place them on the act, and then you need to put 2 clues for investigator. The tests you need to pass are willpower and agility tests, which I do think that if you're only playing in 2-player, can be very tough. Because if you're playing someone like Daisy and Roland, they don't have great numbers in these stats. You really need like Skids or Agnes. So you have to either have that player count or need to be able to deal with like 4 of these checks. Because if you fail, you've spent that clue. It's already gone.
Yeah.
And ideally, you don't need to waste the actions. That being said, this is not the end of the scenario if you fail, because by the time that this agenda rolls around, if this agenda dooms out, instead of losing, you spawn a Mordoth instead, and you get this thing. So it's not like failing the ritual is over, right? You have one final chance. It's kind of like have you played Elder Sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the end boss of Elder Sign where haven't gotten all the Elder Signs yet, and so you have to spawn the big guy. And it's very similar because when that happens in that game, you're not expected to win either. Because then this guy shows up and he's enormous. I love the fact that this guy has the action on him, the throw leader chandler on him. I do think that it's somewhat counterintuitive that it provokes an attack of opportunity to do so.
I'm pretty sure. So on our first run on this, that's what we did, and there's no way that we considered that it would provoke an attack of opportunity.
Yeah, it's it's also basically unevadable because it'll ready at the end of investigator's turn, each investigator's turn.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are you going to do? And the stats are so high, especially for this early scenario, that there's no way you're going to kill it. It's possible. It's definitely possible to kill it, especially if you go the cheese route, which we'll talk about later, I guess. But yeah, the whole point is that you're not going to be able to kill this guy, and you either throw leader at him or you run. Running, of course, does not lead to success either. You just lose anyway. So maybe don't run.
Those stats, I don't think we've seen anything like that since.
No, like it's actually very rare to see 3 damage or 3 horror on anything. I remember that there's that one enemy in the Dream Eaters that has 3 damage on it. And then there's like ancient ones like Azathoth. Although Azathoth doesn't actually deal 3 and 3, right? It deals 2 and 2.
I think it's just 2 and 2.
Yeah. So this guy's more powerful than Azathoth.
Yeah, the 5 fight and the 6 evade is just that's the part that looks scary to me. Yeah.
That's tough. Yeah. Especially if you only have like 12 experience in these decks.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, thematically though, going back to what you're saying about, this is trying to teach you that the ancient ones are scary. Like, who are you as an investigator versus the terrors of the mythos? Like, yeah, this is Exhibit A, and it's in the opening campaign. So the problem is, I don't think this is what you end up seeing in any future campaign. It's just not quite this horrifying, I suppose, or bleak of an outlook.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely ways that it could be better, for sure. I think that in what it's trying to do, it somewhat succeeds in, as you were saying before, trying to show the players that it's okay to fail, or that at certain points there might be insurmountable odds. And that's the sort of theme that the game is trying to go for with its whole entire aesthetic, of course. As you said, though, the issue is that in a lot of the scenarios, it's not that. You rarely get that feeling of there's no way out of this. But in this scenario, there are very frequently places where there is literally no way out, which is different for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk player count for a second. I've beaten this when I played solo, and I can sort of see why it's not so hard because I played Wendy. I think I did something like, honestly, maybe I even got all 6 cultists. I'm not sure. But even if I hadn't, you can go through the main path, you evade 1 or 2, use something like survival instinct, like I said, and then you just push through to the ritual site, you get 2 clues, and you pass this test twice. That's it.
Yeah, this one is a tempo scenario. This one is this is the scenario that you put in front of someone who says like, oh, I want to put like healing in my deck. Whereas you would be like, just if you won the scenario faster, you won't have to deal with any of this. That is this scenario.
And if you have, 3 or 4 players, getting everyone through the main path with those cultists is a little bit more tricky. You I don't know. The number of cultists, right, doesn't scale with the number of players,
Yeah.
so it's a little different. Although I guess with 4 players, you could say someone can go in, just tank them all, and then everyone else runs through because they'll just engage the first person.
Yep.
Hey, I mean, okay, there are ways, but yeah,
Yeah.
don't let this guy spawn.
Yeah, I think it ultimately is a little bit of a failing on the theme of the scenario, that the ideal thing you need to do is not let it spawn, because it kind of feels a little anticlimactic when that happens, when you're like, "Oh, we stopped it. Okay, we did it." Whereas having like a final showdown with it would have felt like a lot more cool. But of course, I mean, it's hard to argue with what the scenario is doing.
Mhm.
Um,
That's true. As a finale, right? They have tried various
yeah,
takes on that.
And-
The next campaign also kind of has a
yeah, that's true.
similar ending. We won't talk about it yet, but sometimes you do get a chance to have a showdown with the big bad.
Yeah. I think that's actually part of the reason why I believe that this scenario you're meant to lose. Because the more climactic event is Umordoth spawning and utterly destroying you. Like everything is leading up to that moment when you're like, Umordoth shows up, we've run out of time, we failed to stop him, and desperately we need to survive or throw Lita Chandler at it.
Mhm.
Like I think that's like the canon outcome of this scenario is that happening.
I agree.
And so that's where they're leaning towards in that sense, which makes it so that actually winning the scenario is a little bit deflating.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we want to talk about the resolutions then?
Yeah, let's do it. So R1, I believe, is if you did the ritual, right? Yes. So that one is yeah, you've done the ritual, everything's good, you get 5 bonus experience, you're good. It's on, as I said before, it's the most boring one, which is a little bit of a shame. Resolution 2 is if you defeat Umordoth, which I think is actually pretty cool. You being able to actually defeat Umordoth, I don't think you actually get to kill it, right? It just retreats.
You repel it.
Yes, which is very ancient one of them. They don't die; they just don't care about you. But you do get 10 more experience. So it has this thing where you're like, oh yay, we actually did something. We were able to defeat it, even though we got spawned. So that ending is pretty cool. And then R3 is throwing Lita Chandler at it, which again I think is the canon ending. It has this extra thing about you having to put a madness into your deck, which is very flavorful. And you throwing Lita is honestly kind of funny, which is like it very much leans into that sort of pulp aspect of this game where it's just like, get out of here, just throw it. It's really funny.
I like how it says on the card, it's only after her.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's probably the best outcome narratively speaking.
Mm-hmm. Notably, though, it's the only one that doesn't say that the investigators win.
True. It very much is like trying to be in that ambiguous, like, oh, maybe you could do better kind of state.
Yeah. In the
Which,
future,
again,
the campaigns often, say the investigators win the campaign with an exclamation mark, or sometimes with a question mark, or I don't think they ever just flat out say nothing here. Either you just lose or they leave a little open with a question mark. And yeah, I have a friend who always says R1 is the best, resolution every single time. But here there's, legitimately a couple of different possibilities that make sense with the theme of this campaign and how it might end. So I think that part's good. I think this, not yet, but we'll probably talk about the campaign as a whole. It is a little mini campaign. In the future, I think we'll do it in a separate video for a whole campaign review. But, this is the Lita Chandler campaign, right? So she doesn't actually help kill him because he's not a monster either.
he's not a monster.
Yeah.
Luckily, everything else in the scenario is, though, except the cultists.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay. Encounter deck time? Oh, wait, no. Scenario reference card.
Oh, yeah. That's probably better.
So we get
you add an Elder Thing in.
Yep, and it's a -5. That is scary. Also, you get to reveal another token if the Ancient One is in play. That's awful.
And widely enough, none of these are if you fail effects. They all just happen.
Oh, you're right.
That's tough.
Oof.
Yeah. Again, they've never done this since. It's usually all if you fail effects.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah. I think that the place of doom on the nearest enemy is pretty bad. Because you're gonna have enemies on the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's tough.
Okay. No, nothing more to say about that. All right. The special thing about this scenario, so there's lots of things we've already seen before. The only thing that's new is these two cards over here on the right, which are just awful.
Yep, they're pretty bad, and you're gonna fail the test pretty much no matter what. Choosing a card or taking a damage in a horror is a pretty tough choice. Although choosing a card is usually the least worst option, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're taking damage and horror, one of those is your bad health / sanity value. So it's like, ugh, he's gonna take like 5 damage.
Yeah,
that's not happening.
And this is a separate choice for each one, so that can stack up.
Yeah.
Yikes. Okay, yikes.
It's tough. Yeah.
Okay, so you get one of these 4 sets, and these are the agents of something or another.
Yep.
And that can change the way the scenario plays out a little bit, but honestly, it's kind of the least of your concerns. But it is a little preview of what shows up in future campaigns, because most of the campaigns have one of these sets that shows up more than once in that campaign. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah. So, yeah, I like these sets because they do kind of foreshadow that other ancient ones are in play, and so that's what you need to expect. It kind of is it adds to the, hey, we're gonna make expansions for this game product, because you can be like, oh, when are these gonna go? Like the young deep ones don't show up until Innsmouth, which is always hilarious to me.
Yeah, and they even had like the idea that the deep ones do something when they engage you, or maybe they didn't design it until they said, oh, what did we decide 5 years ago?
Right. I also think that because we obviously this is Agents of Yogg-Sothoth, right? So that was the next one, obviously, and then this is the Agents of Hastur. Or actually, sorry, it's Agents of the King. Is that no? It is Hastur.
I think it's Hastur. Yeah.
They say it in the thing. But yeah, we technically haven't seen Cthulhu. We technically haven't seen Shove yet. So these are always fun to be like, oh, when are these ancient ones coming in? Because Cthulhu is such an iconic ancient one that he has to come in eventually.
Yeah. So most of them have 2 treacheries and 2 enemies. Sometimes you get victory points with them. Sometimes you don't. Not that it matters in this scenario, but
yeah,
they're all pretty scary treacheries, I think, especially in the campaigns that they really belong to. But even here, I mean, it just stacks up, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I will admit, I do think that this one is the worst one to get. You already, especially in this scenario, you already have so many enemies that you need to deal with, the cultists and these ghouls, and then eventually in Mordoth, that having these guys show up is so annoying. This guy is huge. These guys deal you horror when you defeat them, which is like so BM. This one by far is like, I'm like, I hate this counter set. But yeah.
Gosh. Dreams of Ralia, or however you pronounce that, is an awful card. I'm scared of this card every single time. The -1 sanity is kind of backbreaking because it just happens, right? It's kind of like test of 4.
Yeah.
And then the way to get rid of it is something that they made it harder to do. So someone else can do it for you.
It's like its own combo. This one killed me in Innsmouth. It's not in this scenario, obviously, but in Innsmouth, where it's just like, oh yeah, I'm fine, and it's like -1 sanity, you're dead. And I'm like, oh geez, I forgot that was a card in this scenario, in this set. Yeah.
Anyway, pick your poison. Basically, you'll get something.
Randomly pick your poison.
Yeah. Okay, the rest of them, I mean, Ancient Evils is here again. That's just going to speed things up. You can get gorped by Rotting Remains and the Grasping Hands, as we talked about before. The Cultists are here. There's a lot.
There's a lot. The tough part is the Cultist plus Ancient Evils combo, where you get like 3 Doom on the board immediately. You have to advance. Luckily, with this scenario in particular, as I said before, advancing to the end is not the end. So I think that's why it's like kind of okay. But if you're trying to disrupt the ritual, this is like the most annoying part.
I mean, it's kind of the end if he shows up, right? So,
That's true. Unless you have a plan for him.
yeah, yeah. All right. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say about that.
No.
You wanted to mention something about other tactics for this scenario.
Yeah, so this was this was discovered pretty early on in the game's life, that the quote unquote ideal way to win the scenario is to not progress the scenario. You wait until the final agenda pops while you still have the first act.
Mm-hmm.
Have Umordoth spawn I think it spawns in the ritual site, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's on the back of this card. Yeah, if it's Act 1, you put it into play and you spawn there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go in and then you wail on him. And you spend that entire time not having to deal with the cultists that come into play, and not having to go into any of these terrible locations that stop you from leaving or punish you for entering.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the main faults of this scenario, which they did fix, quote unquote, in the Return to, or maybe not fix, but punish.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little unfortunate in that sense. It really knocks off the it means that the scenario doesn't work as intended if the ideal way to do it is to not engage with the scenario.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where it's the player is choosing their experience, right? If you want to choose something, I mean, sure, like you did it, congratulations. But
Yeah.
Ideally from the design standpoint, you don't want those things to happen.
Yep.
But yeah, that I mean, my opinion on this one is you just have to sort of rush it, and the game will make that very hard for you. So cultists spawning in these other annoying locations, I think, is going to really slow you down. The number of enemies, like you said, yikes, it's just a lot. And with a small map too, it makes it not particularly interesting. All right. Anything else you want to say before we move on to the ratings?
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, then we'll do what we usually do. If you haven't seen our discussion of how we rate our scenarios, there is a video all about that. But for now, we'll just go ahead and talk about the replayability, the fairness, the balance, and the experience.
Yeah. So I think starting off for playability, I'm going to start off by giving it a 2. So it is more replayable than The Gathering for me because you'll get different encounter sets from the Agents of, and depending on how you did in the previous scenario, different cultists show up, obviously. And of course, there's randomization with the locations. Ultimately, though, that amount of randomization does not affect how much the scenario plays out. It's basically going to be the same every time. You're going to go to locations, you're going to have a bad time, you're going to spawn the cultists, and then you go in, and then you either stop it or more of the spawns. That's pretty much it. The amount of leeway that I'm giving is because of the fact that there's the resolutions for whether or not you stop the ritual, defeat Umordoth, or lead the Chandler into Umordoth. That's good. If there was only one ending, then that'd be pretty much bad. But yeah, that's where I'll put it.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you get the random locations, but they're not interesting, right? They're just like, I hope I don't get the bad one.
Exactly.
Yeah, 2 is fine. Like I said before, there's a reason I haven't really replayed this one. It's not just because of it being, hard. Like that's not really part of our rating per se. It's more that it's not very different each playthrough. Like you kind of have the same thing going on, and yeah, a different set of enemies doesn't really. They're like I said, they're the least of your problems, and they're only 4 of the rather large encounter deck. Anyway, next one.
I think that this is the quintessential scenario that is not fair to the players. Am I going to do it? Sure. I will put it at a 1. I think that it is by definition unfair to the players. It does not telegraph a lot of the absolute worst parts of the scenario, namely that location that you can't leave.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know which encounter set you're going in, which encounter set from the Agents of encounter sets that are shuffling in until you draw them. So there's no way to plan around those. The Umordoth is insane, and the amount of cheese necessary to make this fair scenario is the reason why it's unfair.
Yeah.
So I think that by definition is very unfair, which in my opinion is what they were going for. But based on this scale, I think that I have to put it at a 1.
Yeah. And that's the second question about appropriate pressure. It puts pressure on the investigators, but is it appropriate for what the investigators should be able to do? Not really, in my opinion, and not in a fun way, right? So you've played this with a little bit more XP in your deck. Was it
Yeah.
better?
I think it was. So I think that's the issue about it, is that the better you get at the scenario, the more boring it is, because then you just go to the ritual site and stop, which I was talking about earlier about that resolution not being the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I had to do in my playthrough was I did go to the ritual site and complete it, and then I did a whole cheeky thing of, oh, what if I just don't get the last clue, and now I'm gonna have the boss spawn, and now I'm gonna just kill it for fun. So it's like you make your own fun in this scenario, which is not something that the scenario is doing on purpose.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you then. It's just it doesn't give you much to deal with, and I guess you can mitigate things going bad by chucking Lita at Murdoch, but okay, right? It's not really what you were intending to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine ways that they could have made this better by keeping, by giving you a little bit more play with the locations, maybe making what he readies after the end of every investigator's turn. Like,
Yes.
that's unnecessary, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It
basically makes skids useless.
Right. Like, I guess it allows you to evade and then play something, and then now he's your problem again in the enemy phase. Okay. All right.
So if I'll say something, well, actually no, that's not true. I'll say something though about balance. It has those locations that you can investigate with those other stats, and this question is not about, like how easy is this scenario to complete. It's about how, relative to other investigators, how much are you going to have like a similar amount of pressure on you between investigator groups?
Right.
And I think that it's actually pretty balanced in the sense that you're probably going to lose no matter who you bring.
Okay.
That being said, I think that it's like in the one part where this is massively imbalanced, and this is just a testament to how much I hate this location. It's the location that makes you test 4 foot to 3 foot to leave.
Intellect, right?
That is a huge knock. Like literally no one except for Secrets is going to be able to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And you may be stuck there the entire scenario, which has happened to me.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I was going to say, like, there's one other part where it asks you to choose a stat, right, on the ritual site. It's either willpower or agility. I don't know why it's those two, but sure.
Yeah, it's like they're like defensive stats. I don't know why you're doing stuff with them.
I don't know, but that at least has, you have a reasonable shot that someone on your team can do that. But the problem is you're spending your own clue, right?
Yeah, so the Seekers can't even maybe do that. Well, I mean, obviously Ursula could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, if you have high willpower, then you might not be getting as many clues as Seekers, so you can do that as well. But if the Seekers are getting the clues, then they're not taking the tests, and yeah, it's very weird. It's like it's trying to nudge people towards, hey, you don't need to have a high intellect to win the scenario, and then it has that one location where you need high intellect to actually do something in the scenario. So there's like aspects where it is like trying to go for like non-secret play, but it kind of just, I don't know why that location exists.
Yeah.
So I'll put it at I'm going to put it at a 3. I'm going to be a little bit wonky out there. Because I will commit to my points. I do think that no matter who you bring, you're going to have a tough time regardless of who you bring. So it's in that sense, it's balanced.
Yeah. It's like they sort of tried, but then it kind of misses the bigger picture sometimes. So I agree with you. The different locations where you can investigate using different stats is good. The ability to choose a different test at the end is good. That you have the cultists from before. You have a variety of different enemies that you might need to deal with. So there's something for everyone to do. It's just hard. But then they kind of, that one location is it docks it like several points for me too. Like
Yeah.
I'll put it at like 3.5. Like I agree with you. It's just that one location really hurts it, and I don't blame anyone who just removes it from the box entirely.
Yeah.
And maybe that one shouldn't show up in the Circle Undone either. Just saying.
They did remove it in the Return to Circle Undone.
They did.
Yeah. I don't know why they didn't do it the first one, but
I don't know. All right.
yeah.
So now kind of the saving grace maybe is, does it establish the fiction it's trying to evoke? Well, sure does.
It sure does. If the fiction they're trying to evoke is you absolutely failing, then that is what it does that successfully. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my blind playthrough with this. We were, we had 4 cultists that spawned. We defeated all the cultists, and then we got in. We weren't able to complete the ritual, and so Mordoth spawned. And the funny bit about this was we didn't have Lita in play, so we saw that the action ability on Mordoth. We're like, we need to find Lita. So manically, everyone just started drawing cards as fast as they could to try and find Lita and put her into play. But it was not enough. We couldn't find her, which to us was actually brilliant. Like, to us, we themed it like she got lost in the woods and we couldn't find her to throw her to her Mordoth. And so in that sense, because of that one action under Mordoth, it's not a defeat a Mordoth or you have to do the ritual site. Mm-hmm. There is that last little bit of thematicism where it's like, yes, it's here because Lita Chandler broke the barrier between the thing or whatever the actual story is. I don't actually remember. And so that really added to our experience where we're like, that was really fun. And in the end, we loved the resolution that we got, that we all died because we couldn't find Lita in the woods.
That's so funny.
And so, yeah, it's one of those things where it's this emergent narrative that comes out of this game. I mean, that's why this game is great, right? Mm-hmm. But these aspects, these details that it adds to, have the scenario react to the story it's telling was really key. So I think that in effect of its experience where it's deliberately trying to punish players to teach them like this might happen to you. I'm going to give it a 4.5. I still think that there could have been more things they could have done to better the experience. I do agree that a lot of these locations are very thematic. I do agree that Twisting Path is thematic, although they could have made it slightly different. There's ways to do it without having to just lose the action. But I think that there's some things they could have done, especially with the resolution in which you disrupt the ritual, because that one doesn't have a great experience. That resolution in particular.
It's funny that you say that. Like, the more I think about it, I felt pretty good about doing that. Like, thematically, it just sort of ends and, everyone goes home happy, I suppose. And it's not as, like, cool as the showdown. But I felt pretty good about doing it because it was like, yeah, I know this is hard and I could pull it off, right? Yeah. So there's something kind of neat about this being a finale, and this first question about, is it a new and interesting gameplay? Maybe not a loop per se, but there's this, you need to go as quickly as possible pressure that you never got before, right? You get a little bit in the Gathering if things aren't going very well, but Midnight Mass doesn't. It's okay if you don't get all 6. You're not, pressed for time. This one, it is go time, right? And there's something fun about that. It's a little too punishing, but it's the first time that we get a kind of the frantic side of Arkham, where you better pass these tests and you better get through the locations, or else it's the end. It's the last one. Yep. There's no fail forward here, right? I mean, there is a little bit in the Lita ending, but I kind of like it. I kind of like that part of the scenario. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that you're gonna have a good time doing it, but I can see a new thing emerging from a style of gameplay where I feel, the Midnight Mass is kind of fun and breezy to some extent compared to this one, right? And they do need to give you a little bit more of a, not challenge necessarily, right? That's not what this is about, but the experience of it, you have to go as quickly as possible, because if not, there's something coming.
Yeah, I think that this experience it definitely is what the game is trying to be, and it evokes it well. I think the issue is that for a lot of players, it's like not the game that they wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I was telling you about this before the episode, that this scenario is like the Dark Souls of episodes. Oh, sorry, of scenarios, where it's like it is intentionally punishing to be able to like tell you that like this is the experience that you're gonna have, so be prepared. And the only thing, the thing that's bad about the scenario, about that experience, is that in a lot of other scenarios you don't get this punishing aspect of it. So in some extent, it's like kind of almost misrepresented. It's like this is so stupid. I'm going to talk about Baldur's Gate for a very brief second.
Go
In
for it.
the original Baldur's Gate TRPG, there is a location that's very near where you start that is insanely difficult to progress through, and like you go there, and there's these like skeleton guards that are enormous, and you cannot deal with them. But the rest of the area is actually not that bad. What it's trying to indicate is that this place is not for you yet. You have to get better at the game, level up, and get better stuff before you come back and be able to deal with this. That is this scenario to me, where it's like, it's so difficult. It almost is like, if you can figure out a way to deal with this scenario, you can learn how to succeed at this game.
Yeah, you're right. And it almost is a good time to talk about the campaign as a whole. That the fact that there's only 3 scenarios. And in most other campaigns, when you get to the end, you get to the ancient one, you've already played, 6 or 7 scenarios, and you are prepared for something big. And here, you're not quite ready, but maybe this is a good teaser to say, hey, if you buy our game and play 7 scenarios before you get to an ancient one, then you might be able to pull this off.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think the failing is that it's like, for someone who's like, the game is these 3 scenarios, it can be very disappointing. But it's like, for us too, where like we have literally every single thing that this game has brought out, it's like we can see the perspective that this scenario shines, but it's hard to see it without literally getting everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard for this to be in the core set.
Yeah.
But
the monetary value, it's not very good.
Yeah, exactly. But that's sort of, the Midnight Mask itself, or sorry, Night of the Zealot itself has the Midnight Mask, which is so good that one you can replay over and over again without even bothering with the other 2 scenarios. I'm sure a lot of people do. That's not what the game is. The game is more than that one scenario. So it'd be nice if they had, just one other thing in the core set to want to replay before getting to this kind of finale.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we briefly mention the Return to, which there's just one thing I want to mention, really.
No, yeah, let's go straight to it.
Okay. Let's go over back to Tabletop Simulator. Okay, we're back to look at some Return to aspects of the Devourer Below, where you'd think that, maybe they would improve upon some of the things we just talked about. And as far as choosing the ancient one, that is the case. So this,
it basically punishes you for doing that cheese strat, where for every act that you didn't accomplish by the time this happened, it just gets more beefy and more difficult to fight. So it does actually, it at least tries to tell you like, hey, you actually kind of need to engage with the scenario if you're going to defeat a Mordoth. So I think that this is an okay solution.
Yeah.
Because it's not positive reinforcement, it's negative reinforcement in the sense that it's like, don't do that, don't do that. But I think it works in this sense because the scenario is supposed to be punishing, and so it punishes you in the ways that you aren't supposed to do, and yet still leads you down the path to do what it was intended.
That art is really creepy.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
I don't know. There's a skeleton in the middle though. Okay, the other encounter card here. There's 2 of these, I believe, in the encounter
deck.
There
are 2. Yes.
This is the first time I think you can just get outright killed in the game.
Yeah.
Which is different than defeated. This is game over.
Yeah. This card is, I think that this card, to me personally, is hilarious.
Yep.
Because so the the combo of this card, because it's so you have to go into getting this card with exactly the right circumstances. You have to have gone into upkeep with no cards, and then you need to draw your weakness or something that gets forced out of your hand.
Mhm.
So Agnes can't actually die to this card. Um, so actually no,
She
sorry.
can. She can.
Right, sorry. Let me rephrase. If you go into Mythos phase with one card in your hand, then this will kill you.
Mhm.
But you basically, that means do not end your turn with 0 cards in hand. You need at least 1 card in hand at the end of your turn, so that in upkeep you draw up to 2 cards to be able to not have this card kill you, which is really funny to me.
But you can get comboed with another encounter card, because remember, this is each investigator has to do this, which
True.
is wild. So you can get the other one, Immortus Hunger or Wrath, I guess, right?
Yes.
And then that one,
Immortus Wrath.
that's the test 5. So you could do this and then decide poorly to discard, to take they choose to discard cards from your hand, and then you have 1 left or 0 left, and then someone else draws this, then you're just out.
Yeah, it's pretty tough in a 4-player for sure.
Yep.
In solo you won't have this issue, luckily.
No.
But you'll have different issues.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's a fun card. I don't think the heal 1 damage does a whole lot. I mean, it's annoying, but it's really the hand discard, which I'm okay with. Like the set as a whole, Return to the Gathering, emphasizes you'll be discarding cards from your hand. So here's kind of the payoff for that. So that's all right.
Yeah. I think that ultimately it's the last scenario and it's supposed to be punishing. I think that it's honestly a fine card. Yes, it can kill you, but like that is the point of this scenario, and you're most likely already at the end of it anyway.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But it can lead to some frustrating moments for sure.
All right, we have 4 new locations that you could get into the scenario, but you're only gonna get 4 total, right? So
correct.
All right, this one succeeds at a skill test on a treachery. Treachery gains surge. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Wow. Okay. Each enemy at this location cannot take more than 1
this
damage.
Sucks. That's absolutely terrible.
That's awful. All right, that one's sort of par, I think.
Yeah.
Just as the same thing, but evasion. Okay.
Don't evade. Yeah, these are all bad. I think that it's tough because, like, what was I going to say? All of these are fair, with the exception of this one. And these ones are very difficult. So, like, it definitely spices up the locations a bit, which maybe is good. It at least dilutes the deck so that you have less chance of getting this card.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's the best part about getting more of them, I guess. But they're pretty bad. Like this one sucks.
Yeah, it's like what Nathaniel Cho's weakness, right?
Yeah, everyone's Tommy Malloy. Yeah, Tommy Malloy came from the corpse clearing.
Oh no, that would be a good custom campaign just about that little story. That's so funny.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think the return to isn't gonna. The corpse dweller or whatever it is, the
one that walks to the main path.
Yeah, I mean that makes things pretty tough too. Corpse taker, yeah.
Yeah, this guy is tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, move it to the card agenda. Again, it's one of those. It's the scenario doesn't. Again, if you're dealing with Immortal, the scenario doesn't care if you do out. Right. So it's not the worst. So, yeah.
I don't think that the return to in this particular scenario makes it all that different, or at least kind of spicy in some way. Unlike I think the Midnight Mass, which gives you a nice change, right, where you don't know which enemy you're going to get, you don't know which of the cultists you're going to get. This is just like turning the knobs up a little bit, right? So which is fine for return to, but Uh, I think you can use the Arkham Woods locations in Return to the Circle and Done as well.
Correct. They're pretty tough.
Yeah.
Getting this thing and you have a goat spawn on you.
Oh gosh.
God.
I mean,
Yeah.
well, you just have to evade. I mean, that's tough,
Yeah.
but like, I kind of like that ability.
Yeah.
I like all of them. I think they're kind of interesting ideas, and well, limit once per test on the, hey, here's a tangent, but maybe this is how they should have worded the weakness.
The mystic
from,
weakness?
Yeah, from the Scarlet
Yeah.
Keys.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay. All right. I think we're done. Unless you have anything else
Yeah.
you want us to talk about here.
No, yeah, I mean, that's basically it.
Okay.
Nothing much has changed.
So overall, I mean, it's a good campaign. Like, you have to buy it, right? You have to get this campaign. You don't have to get the Return to. In fact, a lot of people are gonna say it's just not in print right now. But it shows what Arkham can be. A lot of really good moments in it. It's not a campaign that you're gonna go back to and play that often, just because there's better things. Like, I'm not a fan of less than 6 or 7 scenarios in a campaign personally.
Yeah.
I like to sit with my decks for a while. Only getting to upgrade twice is kind of meh, but there's so much here that shows the design and like the design philosophy that is good. There's some things that they clearly need to work on, but there's a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah, the strength of this campaign is that it shows you what Arkham can be, and it shows you what to expect. It shows you that your choices matter, that the degree of success you have matters, and that you might lose, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that sense, this campaign is like it's the best tutorial for a board game I've ever seen.
Yeah, and
even though the tutorial may take like 8 hours to complete.
And it might be that this is the best campaign as far as following through on your choices. It could be that 3 scenarios makes it a lot easier, but Lita and the Ghoul Priest and the cultists having a huge impact on the future scenarios is huge.
Yeah. There's definitely you can tease out where this campaign has influenced other campaigns, especially with Midnight Masks. I'm thinking about the final scenario for the Forgotten Age with the Lita Chandler stuff, where if you've gone down one of the 2 paths and not completed it successfully, you have an easier time of getting their endings instead of the main ending. So there is that thread of like the allies that you make along the way help you along the road. It as you said, it's only a 3 scenario campaign, so there's not a lot they can do with the choices that you made, but what they did do was very inspiring. Like I think I said this at one point somewhere, probably in a video that I made, that the moment where it said like, if the Ghoul Priest is not in the victory display or whatever, write in your campaign log the Ghoul Priest is still alive, was the moment that I fell in love with this game. Because I was like, oh my god, it's actually reacting to what happened in the scenario. And the choice that I made to resign or actually kill the Ghoul Priest. And so that tiny detail is like, it was in the first scenario. And I think that it massively succeeded on that aspect.
Yeah, it just does so much with one line. And sometimes I get disappointed in future campaigns where I write something in the campaign log and I never see what impact that had, because it was maybe it's just for flavor and that's fine, but sometimes I'm just waiting. I'm like, oh, is that going to matter? Just writing down something in the expedition journal or whatever it is matter for a future scenario? And then when I furiously look through the book to see if I missed something, and I get disappointed that there isn't something there. Mostly harkens back to everything here really mattering. The burning down your house, right?
Yep. Not resigning, last scenario. Yeah, everything mattered.
All right, cool. Well, thank you to everyone who has stuck with us for this rather lengthy discussion of the Devourer Below.
Yeah, but I hope that these are going to be not as long in the future, I think.
Yeah, there'll be some points, I think, that we may have to dwell on in the future, but because this is the original campaign that sets the tone and the framework for which future scenarios get made, I think there's more to say here. And Devour Below itself is a little controversial, so it's not surprising we have opinions.
Yep.
Cool. Well, you will get more from us about the Dunwich Legacy, which was the first full campaign, and is thankfully also in its own box now too.
Yeah, super excited for that.
All right. We will see you all then. Bye.